Hello and welcome to this webinar conducted by the Hindu on education every Saturday at 5 p.m. Today we are discussing how do we bring our researchers back home. We started out with researchers covering all subjects, but we've narrowed it down to scientists. India does have a very large diasporic talent in the US or in other countries too. It's been a tradition for Indians to go abroad, pursue higher studies, and do research. They're often at the cutting edge of those research areas where they've selected. They do very well and they make a mark. Some of them go into business, some of them stay in academia, some of them even become policymakers. They help governments there. And the question has always been that while earlier there was this idea of looking at it as brain drain, people studying here in the best of universities and going abroad, and so India losing out on the brain that it has and it has developed. That was the concern. Now, later the discourse sort of changed to brain sharing, or it's actually a brain gain because they go abroad, the talented Indians, they learn much research and they become accomplished scientists, researchers, so they can possibly be useful. They can possibly put their they all have a desi heart, and so they many of them consider coming back, but the research environment here is forbidding, despite all the pluses of living home, being with family, being in India. Despite the desi heart beating, there is the professional heart, the professional mind that says India is not a good place for research. Now, another country that has made a success of this is China. China has a very, very well worked out policy. And in fact, while India hasn't made any big plans out of Indian talent living abroad, China has made very specific plans. They have, it's attracting that talent and the knowledge they have, and some critics would say the intellectual property they possess back into China has been a part of their strategy. They've done it very well with very liberal terms, higher salaries, perks, and accommodation, and immediate grant of research projects, money, and all that. So the system is very well worked out, and India doesn't have it. Just has a couple of fellowships, and the salary is rather meager, and the research grant, it takes a long time for research grants, research proposals to be processed and accepted. So all that is forbidding in India for Indians who may consider returning back to India. Has the government addressed that? There's been a recent scheme, especially focused on IITs. So the idea is to bring researchers back into IITs to sort of get them to do research and teach here. That scheme was announced recently, but does that address? It's fairly limited, and it's limited to the IITs. But is that a template? Is that what can the government do more, or should it? That's the question we are addressing today. We have a very interesting and diverse panel, largely scientists. They are in science. We have Shantanu, who's been here before, professor at Azim Premji University. Shantanu Goswami, welcome. And we have Sandhya Kaushika. She's a faculty member at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. And we have Shweta Tyagi, scientist and associate dean, CDFT. So they are here to share with us. They've all lived abroad, researched abroad, worked abroad, and made the transition here. So they're here to tell us, share their personal stories and also policy suggestions, changes, and so on. Welcome. We start with, we are having some audio issues with Sandhya, and we will try and communicate with her on chat. So I ask her to go first. Tell us, Sandhya, how has your experience been, and how do you extrapolate your own immediate experience to what is happening with government? Do you have any particular suggestions? First, do tell us about how the transition has been for you. You're waiting for Sandhya to read the
Okay,
chat.
I am Dr. Sandhya Kaushika, and I work in the Biological Sciences Department as a scientist in GIFR. And I thought I will share some thoughts about the new scheme that the government is proposing, but also the general issues at hand for people who move back from India, to move back to India from, typically being trained in Western side, in the West. So I would say that the effort is always so that India competes scientifically so that we attract the best. That I think is the goal of both Indian institutions and more recently with this scheme for the government. I would say the problem is not the lack of talent and desire, but there's a huge gap in ability to execute, leading in time to frustration and sometimes doing incremental science to survive, or sometimes just, pushing yourself to the brink of individually having a not very healthy lifestyle or your lab members not having a very healthy lifestyle to get ahead. So I sort of broke down the thing into three parts. If we want to attract talent, what is it that institutions need to do? What is it at the government level that we need to do? And what should people who are looking to move back look for or think about? So the first, I will start with institutions because that's where I think one aspect should really be addressed. And the first and foremost is transparency. When we try to attract people at whatever levels, as postdocs, as young PIs who are just returning with hopes and dreams after their postdoc, mid career professional, or senior research chairs, the institution need to be transparent and honest about what will be available on day one when they sign on the dotted line and step into the institute. Space or an equipped transit space which is available to start their work until their customized space is ready, their startup money ready to spend, not waiting to write grants or trying to negotiate with administration, and the quality and number of manpower that will be available to them the minute they step in. Any point where you have a delay in this leads to a lot of frustration and you start off on the wrong foot. And therefore, institutions need to enable and make sure all these boxes are ticked. And it is important to be clear throughout the entire hiring process from the time the application comes in, what the assessment process is, how they will be looked at, how they will be hired, and what will be available to them. I think having that information and transparency eases the transition because the minute, some people come in and they start saying all of these things were difficult, then the next group of people who have options to go elsewhere will look at those options instead of thinking India is a place where I want to build my scientific career, where I want to realize my scientific dreams. And that's one of the most important things that I feel Indian institutions as a whole and faculty who are part of those Indian institutions really need to step up. And from the point of view of the institution, I would say for both existing labs and people who come in, a person who's designated to help navigate the system, like the purchase system, especially for those who may not have done their PhDs or postdocs in India, something like a lab manager will be a game changer because it will ensure that there is a certain culture maintained in and a discipline maintained. There'll be skills transfer as well as good management of what eventually are really national resources of strains or whatever it is that your lab is generating. And that is often is a huge time sink for our students. And so what ends up happening for a lot of PIs is they spend a lot of time doing management and firefighting, and there is really very little free time where they can think and work closely in the intellectual space to come up with disruptive ideas. So I think this absolutely needs to be fixed for both people coming in as well as people who are there. And I say this with real heart because, you know, I have seen the kind of things that people have to struggle with in the West, and the number of tiny management things that we do which are not related to our core scientific mission or scientific progress is very large. The next thing is that India, in general, does not have a postdoc culture and has a general pipeline problem all through because we bleed good people at all levels to the West. Nowadays, young people, even after their high school, are trying to go abroad for their college education. Definitely, compared to say 20, 25 years ago, majority of the master's student aim to go abroad for their PhD, and there's a good reason for that. These are the most ambitious people. That does not mean that there aren't enough smart people around, but we have to make India an attractive place for people to get trained, which means two things. One, at the level of PhD, we make sure fellowships are dispersed in time, and second, we need to have a culture which fosters postdocs and for our institutions to hire these postdocs. That means as faculty we need to invest our time to give world class training to our trainees so that they are attractive and you're not constantly trying to fill your faculty positions by people who are trained or at least have some amount of training abroad. And that's, this becomes especially true with women candidates who not all of them are able to leave the country and get trained abroad, and then you even more of them bleed from the system. The next thing is senior hires. I think one of the things that the government would like to do is have senior hires. I would say if you want to have senior hires, it's very important that relocation to India not be a mandatory thing to happen, but to provide flexibility to set up a second lab as a transition or a second base and to allow the ease of transition. Because many people who are successful abroad have many things going for them. Why should they come back here? What is it that the Indian ecosystem will offer them which they don't have there? So, for them to sort of look at the collegiality, look at the varied expertise that you might have in an institution network like IITs, they need to sort of dip their feet in instead of saying, you need to commit before we are willing to commit. I think that will make sure that there are some people who come in, maybe have good flow of trainees happening between both sides in a more easy manner, and then that institutional can network itself can kind of support these things. And one thought that I had is, which has been part of debate on social media, is why is IIT alone be the beneficiary of these kinds of special positions that are being envisaged? And I think that the IIT should only be the beginning. Those are institutions with varied expertise across various fields. The institutional network is quite large as opposed to smaller institutes or standalone institutes. And experimentation might be easier to do without affecting core culture of the institution. So these were some thoughts that I had about the institution. At the government level, I think one of the biggest problem has been timely grant disbursement. This has been a sore point for over 20 years, that you have a government, you get a grant in whatever is the funding system, everything, again, there is not enough transparency. And if you get a grant, you're not guaranteed that the money will come in time, and there's tremendous amounts of paperwork requirements. We still need much greater flexibility to permit money use according to the budget head that you want to use it, instead of being tied to a particular way of funding. And also, I think it's very important to fund basic science, not just specific topics or areas that government thinks is a niche. I think this broad-based funding across all streams can be extremely important. And at the government level, the next thing that they need to think about is to actually develop a good scientific culture. One needs to not look at just the top, like what are your PhDs doing, what are your postdocs doing, who are the faculty you're hiring, but you have to look at science education, and even language education. How do you craft a paragraph? How do you make an argument in both high school, middle school, and college education? So you need that investment across the entire vertical to get rewards over time. You can't just say, I'm going to put money just here and expect miracles. Because then what you do is the people who come through the pipeline are people who have access, who have privilege, and not necessarily who are the most talented. And the final thing is, what about the people who are looking to move back? I think India is a very exciting place to do science. I think one of the things is the community is not very large. So, chance interactions with many, many different people doing diverse things is possible. The barriers to collaborations are very low. People are often extremely friendly, and with small amounts of money, you can do exciting for people. But it is very important for people who are looking to move back to do their homework because they will have two body problems to solve. I'm not saying two body problems where the second person is also a scientist. Even they may not be a scientist at all, but they'll have to find a rewarding career. Um, they need to visit in person. They need to ask to see the labs, have honest conversations about what will be available day one when I step in, and not say, yeah, it'll all work out. We will work with you to get this. What does that we will work with you to get this look like? Speak to trainees, especially of people who are setting up labs, and figure out how much running around they need to do, and what actually they have to bring bring to the table, which is not directly related to their experiments or pushing the science forward. So I think having this landscape nailed down will allow us, with honesty, to attract people who want to do adventurous science with a group of people across the country who I think are quite talented and are very open minded as a community to try new things. I think this is something which is very unique, I feel, about the Indian ecosystem, that you approach anybody, many people will be happy to collaborate and start off small collaborations and get things going, which is really a lot of fun for a lot of people. So, I mean, I don't have a whole lot more to add at this time.
Thanks, Sandhya. We will come back to you, perhaps ask your personal story. I would ask Shantanu to weigh in, but perhaps he can tell his personal story. Why did he come back? What was he expecting? And has it panned out? Has the dream, was it worthwhile, your transition here? And also, you like Sandhya, you can speak. She did a very, although she was speaking policy issues, there was a personal angle to it. Very interesting to note that. The scientific or the research atmosphere here actually lends itself to collaboration, unlike in the West, where you're slotted and you're very, very specialized. And collaboration, sort of informal collaborations, are sort of not so welcome there. Very interesting point. Maybe we can pursue that as well. But I ask Shantanu, Shantanu, go ahead. Tell us, how was it? Why did you come back, and how has it been?
Sure. So I'm Santanu Goswami. I'm a professor of climate change at Azim Premji University. So I came back to India after staying in the US for about 1.5 decades, and I did my master's and PhD and postdoc work here. For me, uh, why I wanted to come back was when, I mean, as a climate change researcher, India has always been a place where exciting things can happen actually when it comes to climate change, because there is so many things to work on in here because of the challenges that we see like on a daily level. And I came back to the system through a lateral hire at ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization, and I joined National Remote Sensing Center in the Art and Climate Science area in 2015. So the journey has been the returning back to the system and basically navigating through it has been challenging, but I guess I mean over time I appreciated like what I'm actually getting back from Rasim. That's all I have to say, mainly because I guess I'm going to say because of my background in here. So again, I mean, some of the things that Chainta was saying earlier, uh, coming back to the system, especially after staying in a different Western system for 1.5 decade, was I had my surprises waiting for me. So the two systems were very different. The way things work. and how you navigate through this system, and like basically writing projects for your to raise money, and also the stuff that I actually haven't done in India before was basically this purchasing system. But the all the processes, all the approvals that you have to go through, to acquire your equipments and all, right? So, but I mean, and right now I'm after working in the government sector for about 5.5 years. I'm in a university. It's a foundation university, a part of the Azim Premji Foundation, and so here uh, I am part of a new school of climate change and sustainability. So I've been part of like building up the school and also developing newer research in here, which I'm going to say in my case wouldn't have been possible if I was in the US, because as a climate change researcher, when I mean the stuff that I'm working in here, they're uh, they're quite rooted to the ground. For example, I am a climate scientist, and I've been working with climate projection for each and every Indian district for the last 4.5 years. Uh, but the work I'm driving in here, that is not just building climate projections for different like parts of India, but after I develop these projections, how I build uh, a platform and make it public facing, and then how do I work with different government systems, different civil society organizations to work with them to to basically make sense out of the data and connecting to the real story. So these kind of things that I have been working in here uh, probably wouldn't have been quite possible if I would have stayed in the US. So that part is very positive for me. Having said that, I guess if I want to reflect on the Prime Minister research scheme that I was discussing, in a recent opinion piece as well, is this is this is a great scheme to start with, that's for sure. But then I just want to ask you that is it worthwhile just to focus on a few elite institutions to bring back a few scientists, from the West, basically facilitate their journey back into India. So the question is, should we build a point of return or a place just for return, or should we build a destination for Indian scientists and also probably other scientists to find India as a destination for research? So why I'm saying it, because if we are thinking about building a research infrastructure, then bringing back just a few scientists to a few institutions may not solve the problem. Uh, I think what we should focus on is that when most of our students they go to state universities spread all over country, and the complexities that we have to deal with here in India when it comes to government funding, uh, should our focus uh, widely include those universities and try to build up that ecosystem a lot better, right? I mean that's on my reflection. I guess that's what we should actually focus on, because that way we can. I mean, one of the major part in building a strong research infrastructure is to build a very strong young generation, which is basically your PhD students and the postdocs, and which again postdoc system here in India is not very strong, very robust. So if we are going to actually build a generation of them, uh, so in my opinion, that uh, part of the ecosystem, the higher education or research ecosystem, should get a lot of focus, which is probably not being which is not being discussed as part of the PMRC. But again, I mean, I think this new scheme is a very good conversation starter, I'm going to say. But hopefully it is just a starting point, and instead of us discussing more and more about a place, just a place to return to, we should probably start discussing about building a destination, which is India, for research, for Indian people, Indian researcher staying outside, and possibly a researcher from other nationality as well. And when we say that the destination, we probably will be encouraged to even think about bringing people back, not basically asking them to move immediately or basically relocate immediately, but having maybe joint uh, appointments, right? They don't have to leave the institute that they are already working on. They might be an established professor in there, but also build a research group in here, because what that can also help the ecosystem is that can help us to build these binational or two-way say actions places where students or the early care researchers or even established scientists or researchers can build collaborative like teams, like basically learning from each other. So that's, I guess, as a first point, that's what I'd like to reflect on. In the last 10 years, I have learned a lot, coming back to India and basically navigating my way through a system which was quite challenging in the beginning, but I've learned my way through it. And for anybody who wants to come back to India, I guess one thing I just want to mention that no two systems are similar, right? Every system has its own challenges and its own advantages. So people should be ready, and people should be able to think about it thoroughly and do the homework well. My only hope is 10 years from now, India will be a research destination, not just a point, basically, not just a place just to return to. I mean, I'll come back to that if I have more time afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Shantanu. People say that the general what they say is returnees go through 3 Ds: delay, disrespect, and eventually leading to dissolution. I don't know if how far that is true among the panelists. I asked Shweta to weigh in, give her personal study. Why did you come back? What were you doing there? What were you doing here? How does it compare in terms of research quality, professional achievement, and in terms of personal satisfaction and so on?
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Kalyan. So I'll take a moment to first start introducing my institute, which is Center for DNA Fingerprinting and Diagnostics, and I'm a scientist there. So ours is a very unique environment that we provide services in the form of DNA fingerprinting as well as diagnostics, and then there's a very vibrant research culture. So there are about 20 labs which are doing research on various aspects, including discovery biology or infection biology or many other things. So I introduced this because we have experience from all angles, not only just a hardcore biologist, but other aspects of research that you can be contributing in the society. So I did my PhD from ICGEP in New Delhi, which was kind of interesting because even though it's in New Delhi, the environment is like it was abroad. And then I went for my postdoc to Cold Spring Harbor and then to Switzerland. And what is very interesting is that before I stepped out for my postdoc, I had decided that I have to have a lab in India. So it was kind of pre-marked, and I went there just because I knew that I have to have that experience. And I'm very happy I went there because of the experience I gained and that the research caliber I could raise myself, and then the collaborations I could set up with different people. So that's the good part. But while coming back, the idea or the experiences, the delays, as you mentioned, I'm sad to say that some of them have not been resolved till now. So that's kind of a problem. So I work on chromatin biology, and then the idea is that how chromatin is talking to the rest of the cells, and it's a very niche and discovery based biology. So the first thing that has come up recently is what translational aspect of biology are you looking at? So that I'll touch upon later, but I'll start systematically. So initially when I was applying, the first thing that I noticed was that the window of from you to apply and then the answer that you will get, whether you have been hired or not, is quite long. And as Sandhya was also talking about this, there are many factors which an applicant is facing. So there is a two-body problem. They may have children. For women, they may be even planning to have kids or taking care of kids already. There may be other family commitments that they have to come back to. So they may have aging parents that they have to take care of, and all these uncertainties actually are not good for the applicant. They would rather have a swift decision, and if it's not this place, then they can make plans and go to other places also. So one of the things that I think we are not advertising is that it's not only the research-based scientists that we need people in science for other things also. So we need people who can manage our grant or who can design our experiments and several other things where there are openings. And if you don't get a research-based position, you can apply for other things and then they can move on and get settled. So the second thing which I notice is that the institutions, if you were to talk about women scientists per se, the support given to take care, especially to take care of the child, and now these days even men are caregiver, that needs to be improved dramatically. So you are welcoming a colleague, you have to be mindful that they are bringing a family which has to settle in this new place, and they kind of need that support in the beginning to set up the lab as well as set up their family here. And if this support is given, then one part or one anxiety is removed and they can focus very well on science as such. So the other parts that have been talked about, but I also want to say is the funding is still uncertain. As Sandhya mentioned, that transparency in how much funding, how much seed funding you would get, and how much you have to generate in the long term. I think this is very beneficial for somebody when they are planning their whole next 5-year career or whole career and making a decision that whether I should move to India or not. So that's something that would be very, very useful. But other things which the people coming from outside are not aware, and then once they come here, they realize that, oh, this is a factor. So it's like the day-to-day core funding in a university per se. So you may have a 5 crore equipment, but just to get a pump for 1,000 rupees, you would not have funds. So that's kind of disheartening, and if provisions were made to have this kind of co-funding, that would be good. In institutes, we come from a place of privilege because we have this funding, but the universities don't have. And something that we are struggling with day in, day out is the publication charges. So I am not sure that are the policymakers not aware that there are publication charges, or they are just they think that we will manage somehow. So either the granting agency nor nor the government in general is kind of promoting these publication charges, but they have to be filled, and it's a constant struggle. So all these small things kind of add up, and then they create a buzz which kind of gets reflected to the people who are trying to come back, that whether it's good time to come back or not. For instance, when I was trying to come back, I had this positive buzz that, oh, there's a lot of money, and government is very it's promoting people to come back, and it has these different kind of re-entry schemes. That one of such schemes we are talking about right now. So in terms of if oh, if I was there, what would have happened? And if I'm here, what would happen? I think it kind of is very, very important. So nobody goes in science because they are, they are in for money. But they do want their efforts to be recognized and rewarded accordingly. So if your promotion is not transparent, or if you're not given credit for the things that you may be doing, so like in our institution, you would not only be doing research, but you would probably be doing other services, or if you were collaborating, or if you were doing an interdisciplinary project, would you get credit, and would that get recognized and translated in your promotion? I think matters to people. So those things need to be outlined, that yes, this is, you've joined now, and in 4 years we expect to look at these parameters, and if you meet them, we will be happy to advance you in your designations. And same goes for rewards, awards, etc. So yeah, I think the related jobs need to be made clear how much effort they need to put in before they would be suitably rewarded. Because that's very important. If you're saying that, oh, this is your job description, that it has to provide a service, then you can't turn back and say, how many papers have you published? So that's kind of counterintuitive, but it kind of helps and increase the reach and the number of scientists you're attracting back. At the government level or the school level, it has been touched upon. I think we are aiming for, or we frequently call college students and then tell them about the merits of being scientists. But when you call school children, I'm disheartened to see that all the people who are present there either want to be doctors or they want to be engineers, and they are not aware of the third path. So why we as parents not teaching them that it's okay to be researchers? It's a good job. You can choose that, and you can advance in that, and use it as a career. So I also see positive points for people who are thinking of coming back to India, because the students here are fantastic. So the intelligence level that I have seen for Indian students compared to the students outside, and the amount of hard work they are willing to put, I think it's unparalleled, and that's great. And probably that is why all our PhDs or trained PhDs go abroad for postdoc, and where they start doing so well. So coming back to the re-entry scheme, I came back in such a re-entry scheme, and I think that it's an effort in the right direction. So I pulled out some data, and I was looking at the time when they had these Ramalinga Swamy and Ramanujan re-entry schemes. They said that actually about 650 scientists came back in a period of 5 years. But then I look at the other data. There's a paper on the archives, which is actually saying that out of the 15,000 researchers they polled, only 25% agreed to come back, or eventually came back. I don't know from what duration. So if you were to look at 650 from the 15,000, I don't know if it's a very encouraging number, but at least it was a start, or it had something to show, that yes, people are returning when government has these dedicated re-entry schemes. So the re-entry scheme, it has started for IIT, is great. It's an experiment, and it should definitely go on. And as both Shantanu and Sandhya said, that it need not be full-time. You don't have to leave your job and come. Spend time with us 3 months, maybe make us aware of what we are doing wrong or what we can do better, and that would work for us. So many countries like Singapore or even the Middle East, they give you lab space for part-time work, and you have to maybe spend 3 months or 6 months here, and then you can go back and work in your lab in the West. So I think that kind of works out for both the parties, and then both of us gain. They kind of bring in new techniques, so there's always a flow. It's not stagnant, and we are benefiting from the experience that they are bringing to us. And it's not that only a person who has to quit their job will only come back. So an active scientist can actually also do that. So I think these are most of my thoughts. So yeah, I'll end here. Thank you.
Thanks, Shweta. Perhaps if the government is thinking of very niche areas that they need to focus on going forward, then it may make sense to set up such niche institutes where there's talent, there's recognized talent outside India, and perhaps draw them in. I don't know if that's the way to go. But yes, good critique on the two fellowships. We will come back and probably have a round of discussions on what else can be done given these, given the experience with these attempts. I asked Sandhya to tell we haven't heard her personal story and what it means for India as a whole.
I should say that was really nice hearing both Shantanu and Shweta. I will say that I did my PhD in and postdoc outside the country, and so my first experience with doing high-end research came as a faculty member. When I came back, I joined NCBS, which is a part of the TIFR family and is widely considered one of the best places in the country to do research. I think Shweta would agree with this. I
Yeah.
got a lab space which didn't have water, which didn't have plumbing, and which didn't have sufficient electrical supply, which could take the load of equipment. That's where I started. So you can see where I started. And what I shared with you earlier in this webinar was the difficulties which my own colleagues in my department and across the country, young people who have started in the past 5 years have shared. So not much has changed since then. And then in, about 7 years in, I moved from TIFR, from NCBS to TIFR to the main campus in Mumbai. And I always joke that, hey, I got a lab which had water and plumbing and could take the load of equipment, but it had not been gone in for, I don't know, 30 years. There was fungus growing on the walls. The wiring had to be ripped up and redone. Otherwise, it was a fire hazard. So, things have not improved as much they should have. So when I did a job search in 4 countries, got jobs in 3 different countries, had very good startup, and the reason to come back to India um, was very complicated, with one component being a two-body problem, and also a sense of, okay, let's do some adventurous science where you're not tied to this culture of the next grant that you're getting, but maybe you will be able to have an impact which will be fun, meaningful, and try to do much more creative work. Aside from the personal part also, which I was trying to solve and I felt would be solved slightly better here with the two-body problem. My husband was already very close to getting tenure and in an institution in the US. So he took the jump and came. I came first. And again, as an adventure, 3 days after I landed and I had already signed on the dotted line, my younger daughter was in intensive care, having picked up an infection on the way. So it was a very rocky beginning. And as Shweta said, there are many, many personal and professional pressures, especially women in science, but definitely both people in science face. The quality of daycare, professional daycare that I had in the US and what was available in India was very, very different. And in fact, the NCBS daycare is very good now. And I spent my early career not only running my lab, but doing 4 renovations of the NCBS daycare facility, training the people and running it exactly the way I ran the lab. And so that was time taken away. What I felt was that was also something which made a huge contribution and continues to make a huge contribution to the institution, making that a very attractive place for people to come. But this is the story of India, and I think all of them will agree. Faculty get involved in things which are best kept at the administration level and say, we need to see this, and have the administration execute so that their time can be spent on just doing science, thinking about ideas, maybe training their students well, and staying in that realm, and also having the same life. I think that's very important, that people, sort of have a sane life so that they can invest more of themselves in what they are best trained to do. But I also, since I saw all of these difficulties, but I saw also opportunities. So one of the things which I wanted to do was go in slightly offbeat directions and maybe try new things, even though I didn't know exactly what new things that I wanted to try always. And being at NCBS allowed me to set up a lot of different interdisciplinary collaborations, which happened very organically, working with engineers, working with physicists. And those roots started there, which have allowed me to grow and develop in ways which may not have been as easy if I had taken up my job in the US or in Singapore, or potentially looked harder to get something in Canada. So I think I don't regret it. There were certainly challenges, but it's also been a lot of fun. And one thing which I really thought would come to pass has come to pass. That is, I am able to do slightly more adventurous science than may have been possible if I had taken up my other job opportunities. This is why I always say that come to India, have a sense of fun and adventure, rather than saying, I have planned out my career this way and I am going to execute. If you have that little bit of sense of adventure and a sense of humor, you can still sort of go through this journey with some degree of calmness. However, I will say that we as a country, as a community, need to get better. It was partly for this that, I was the one of the seed persons to initiate the Young Investigator meetings with the help of Ron Vale and NCBS leadership. And I co-organized both the first and second Young Investigator meetings, which initially was, it's like, why are you doing this? But now has grown into a force in India, which was essentially to mentor young people and to connect people to each other. So you have peer mentoring, you don't feel isolated, you have ideas for, linking across institutions, because often you don't know people, especially if you're trained abroad. You don't know all the people in the country. It's very hard to know all of them. You might know a couple of top people, but you won't know the full breadth of people. Now there are many more, how does one say, field specific meetings. But when I first came back, there was very little. I didn't even know who was another neuronal cell biologist in the country. In fact, there were hardly any. In fact, I would probably say almost none. So, the Young Investigator meetings was again something which I started, which I felt was important with others. I must admit it was not done by me at all, but certainly put my energies in my early career to doing it. And I hope that there have at least been some people who have, had advantages from being part of such a community. I feel, Israel has something which has a countrywide network to recruit and help returning people. We could consider something like that. And I find that we do something small like that in the Indian C. elegans community. I was just the second person back. Again, I was one of the people who set up the Indian C. elegans meeting for the first time in the country, and sort of that community has grown, and we try to help each other, sharing resources. Where do you buy things? Where do you share strains? We help each other. We speak to each other students, and I build a community to sort of help this little community succeed and not feel so isolated from the rest of the world. And I think something like this nationwide, where we support and help young people to succeed, and when they are stuck, aside from the transparency angle, we can help them not feel so isolated and help them navigate what can sometimes be a very challenging environment, is very important.
Thanks, Sandhya. Especially the point about how India may offer a lateral movement opportunity. You can probably cast your net wider than if you were in a very settled, specialized atmosphere in the West. We'll take some questions. Saurish Biswas. He's saying, to what extent is the problem of scientific migration less about resources? Somebody made a point here, nobody becomes a scientist to make money. He's referring to that and more about control over research direction, hiring, collaboration, and dissent. And can genuine scientific autonomy exist within highly centralized academic governance structures? Is that how India is organized, Indian research?
Can I quickly jump in over here?
Anyone?
Yeah. So I think that it's true. I'm very lucky to be in TIFR, but I will say that um, at least in the TIFR ecosystem in IISc, it is really not about scientific direction or about my friends who are there in ICERs. It's you can pick your own direction. You can explore in new directions. Nobody is stopping you. And what's really nice is because it's not super expensive. People are not yet super expensive. They are like in the West that you can't take any risk at all. And I agree with Shweta that often our students are, they don't mind a little bit of adventure and a little bit of what I call the jugaad kind of view. So they're willing to try a little small experiment for someone in the side. And if it begins to look exciting, then some other student will come on and build on it. So I have not found it either at the level of faculty or at the level of students that people are unwilling to engage at all. It might not go at the speed at which you might want to elsewhere because you may not be able to turn all your lab resources to this, but it never stops you from getting started and making progress. So I do not know how it is in other centralized, academic governance structures, but it certainly has not been the case of the people I know in either bio departments in IIT, in ICERs, across the TIFR system, ISC, or even CCMB, and Shweta should speak about CDFD.
Yeah, so I think the research direction, hiring, collaboration, what Sandhya talked about, that you can do what you want. Actually, in a part, you can control it by funding. So you can't do what you want if there is no funding for what you want to do, and then you have to disguise your science as you're doing something, and then it caters to that funding that you're applying for. So that's the first and the foremost thing. And the second thing, it also definitely depends on the leadership of your institution or university, or how they are going to take it. But I guess that affects the younger scientists more than the ones who have established themselves, and then they know that this is the path they're going to take, and no matter what anybody says, they don't have really to worry about things. So these are two major things which I feel. So CDFT is it's funded by Department of Biotechnology, and now Department of Biotechnology is consolidating itself into a brick system. So it has centralized. It has started. Uh, Coming up with centralized systems like hiring for PhD or having collaborative grant. So I see both merit, and I also see some points which we should have learned from, other funding bodies like CSIR and discarded them right away, but we still want to try them and we feel that we would do them better. So I see both merit and the negative points, but definitely I feel that the money controls it all.
Okay,
Yeah. If I can maybe add a couple of points in here,
Shantanu, I
because
have a
I
question. Shantanu, I have a question for you.
all right.
Research is mostly driven by the government in India, but what do you think private universities are better placed to draw talent from outside?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. Maybe before I even answer that, I'll just touch on what was discussed right now. When it comes to academic freedom, I guess one thing we should try to understand, is the institution that we are working for, right? I work for the Indian government, and I also work for the US government, and the way the groups work, they're very similar, because first you define the mission, and then you try to basically contribute to the mission. So that's why you do not have 100% academic freedom nowhere. because you're working for a mission, right? I guess when it comes to academic institutes like TIFR and CBS, IITs, iSearch, and some like universities in the US. So there will be academic freedom, but based on the genre of the institute, the academic freedom will be different. Now again, going back to Kilan, what you asked me, the private universities, what role they can actually take in. I am going to say that new age universities like, for example, our university, we are part of the Azim Premji Foundation, and we are self-funded, and our university, our mission is aligned with what the foundation tries to help build a just, equitable, humane, and sustainable society. So uh, all our work is aligned to achieve that mission, and based on which school we are like positioned at, we try to develop work within the realm of the definition of the school. For example, I work for school of climate change and sustainability. we I'm going to say we do have a certain privilege and the freedom to bring in people or help facilitate uh, 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 the Indian scientists, coming back, because uh, at the growing stage, I'm going to say at the growing stage, when you're like developing a group, so of course you have the positions, and then you can define uh, I mean what type of people you want to bring in. So that, and we, for example, we are liberal arts university. We are Research is one of our functions, and teaching is a major function for the faculty members in here. So when we talk to people who apply to our positions from outside India, we make it very clear to the applicants, say that in here, yes, you will be helped, you'll be mentored, you'll be guided to help build your research agenda, but the split is going to be this much for teaching, this much for research, and this much for institution building, like that. I think the new age universities, some of the universities that's coming up in India, the private universities, can really help build this ecosystem. But again, these new age universities also have the added responsibility of building new programs uh, and new teaching programs, I'm going to say. So, because of that, our responsibilities are probably more than probably going to say, like regular faculty members, because we have two things to carry out together when like developing educational programs and research as well. And for institution like us, it is probably a little better because we are self-funded, so we don't necessarily need to go for external funding, external government funding. But that also helps the the point that once you come and join a group which in a congenial group, I'm going to say, right? So you can so, the new faculty can come and build research programs, and while also helping the institute building this teaching program. So in a way, yes, because we have less complexity in our systems, and paperwork is a lot less. So hopefully, this side of, or this like part of the overall higher education also grows in India, so that just like in the US, I'm going to say, like private universities actually end up becoming a very integral part of the overall higher education and research ecosystem. So in short, yeah, I mean, but again, just to add one more thing, because I may not get time to like speak any further. I guess one thing we should remember is that talent follows a place where it can be trusted, you have stability, and you basically join with a purpose.
But staying with
Yeah.
Saurish's question, You worked in government labs. You worked with the Argonne National Labs, very, very prestigious. Here, you work with the remote sensing agency. So, in terms of Saurish's question, how is the approach different from, say, the U.S. government agency and?
Yeah. So I worked in Oak Ridge National Lab for 3 years, and here I was part of the National Remote Sensing Center for 5.5 years. Right.
Right.
I was a postdoc there, and here I was here just a mid-level research scientist. That's what I'm trying to say. The way these two places work, they're in theory same. Because first, what it's a government entity, right? Government entity, they will be tasked to accomplish some mission. So in the Oak Ridge National Lab, I was part of a large scale proposal or project called Next Generation Ecosystem Experiment Arctic, NG Arctic, $100 million project. So the overall goal was, well, build a model for the Arctic. That means to build the like climate model, you have to build data from the ground and all that sort of thing. Basically, it ends up becoming 100-member team, right? But everybody, they get their share, what how they will contribute, and that team lead will have a group of team members. So basically, everybody will be working towards that goal. Having said that, I guess the freedom, academic freedom that everybody had was in writing a paper and developing that data set, of course, aligned with the mission. But if I think about ISRO, NRSC, it's sort of the same, because I was working part of the Earth and Climate Science area. It has a defined goal. Within that, you have the different verticals, and within the vertical, you like project what you want to do, like year, 2 years, ahead of time. And within that, you try to contribute. I guess the main difference was uh, the ambition that you have within those teams. And I'm going to say it's changing dramatically in India right now.
Okay. On that positive note, we'll field more questions. We have Sushri Modapalli. He's or she's asking, "Good evening and thank you for the wonderful insights. Can you please talk a little about your experience in navigating the intangible, rigid, quote unquote, rigid work culture slash environment in academic spaces? Is it more rigid here than there, or is that a big issue?"
I think because I'm already nodding, so I'll say so. I think for the scientist, it's not rigid, or for your scientific work, it's not rigid. I think the rigidity comes when you have to, interface with the administration on certain things, or for the government on certain things. So, for example, I have a colleague who has to import. He works on Drosophila, and he has to import flies, and it's like a monthly cycle where he would run into some or the other problems because the person who's sitting clearing these does not understand that these flies would not survive the courier thing, or there may be other small things, but I don't think so. I even though I said earlier that funding controls it all, within our environment, I'm free to do what I like. I form an idea, as Shantanu was also saying, I propose it to the funding body, my Ps would review, and they would think that whether this idea is solid or not. If I have some proof that I can perform this, I can do it, and it's the same here, same there. And I think they are also as much controlled by funding as we are. But outside of your scientific caliber, when you need these different permissions, that's when it makes it rigid. That is the issues we have.
Okay. Avyukt More, is scientific research given as much cultural importance in India as it is in developed nations? How can we build a culture where research and development are valued more than mere capitalist interests?
So I
One
will
was
take
take that
it.
question.
I can sort of step in.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's a very important and very pertinent question. Um, One of the culture in research is one of failure. And if you, especially working at cutting edge, some of the ideas that you have may not quite work out to be this grand thing that you envisaged. So I always tell my students, and of course it applies to myself, experiments of course fail, but ideas can also fail. And I think in India, in the academic space, the value of failure is not recognized. And I think for me personally, that is the biggest disconnect. And that it's okay to fail, you figure out something from there and build forward. So I think that core part of what it means to work at the cutting edge, where things will fail, you will not always succeed, but both from the government agency and from the society at large, and the young people who work in our labs are influenced, even if we can buffer ourselves because we have jobs from this, is something that we need as a culture to learn and say it's okay to fail in something. And what does academic culture also mean? Academic culture means probing one thing deeply, having multiple points of view, not necessarily one right answer. And all societies struggle with that. In fact, one of the things which scientists struggle when they try to communicate their science to the public is the public often wants yes or no answers. And the answers are very nuanced. And I think nothing in our education system, or I should say not nothing, but little in our education system and our wider, earlier science education allows young people, and therefore the wider culture of the country, to come up with this nuanced understanding of circumstances, of what might be right, when it might be right, when something applies. So I think that's, you really put a finger on something which is very important in terms of the culture of what an academic is. The second thing which you're asking about is capitalistic interest. In fact, I spoke earlier about that we need to fund basic research, not just applied research. And we need to have steady basic research funding, because that will always generate new knowledge. What are national priorities? Today it will be climate change, tomorrow it might be finding bacteria which eat up oil spills or plastics in a more efficient manner, third day it can be something else where you're going to look at an estuary. Those national mandates will change according to what the climate of research is, what's considered as cool, is considered as interesting at this point of time. But the scientific workforce needs to be trained in deeply in what it means to establish a piece of information, how well you have established it, what you can conclude from it, has to occur independent of these national missions. So while I think, and I've always felt this even about the US, about the NIH, and the fact that people who do model system works doing fundamental research will try to pitch it as it's important to solve some disease, I think India can really step away from there and say that, fundamental research we will fund, maybe not in a huge way, but say 20% of the budget will go for these kinds of things, and maybe 70% will go for something else. But let's just spend that money without just mission oriented research, because I think that will really help in the long term develop the kind of scientific workforce who understand when a problem is solved, partway solved, unsolved, and how well we have solved it. And that I think is very important in when you think about scientific culture.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can I just
Go ahead,
weigh
go ahead.
in? I have a different, viewpoint on it. I feel that we as scientists also need to make the public understand what we are doing and not be on a high horse and, just so in a scientific conference it's easy for us because this terminology is what we are speaking and then our colleagues are understanding. But when we are talking to the general public, they're like, what is she saying? And then then the ultimate answer is, are you trying to cure cancer? Yes, sure, I'm trying to cure cancer, and that ends it. So if you were to tell them more and more about what we are doing, probably their mindset towards research would be different than what it is now. And as I said, that in the school already, it's the parents who are, either. So I think this has already been talked about, that whether whether you want to be a doctor or engineer, it's kind of defined, and then the third stream is not open at all. So that's something I wanted to say.
Okay, some positive pointers. Shantanu was saying that India is going to be a major destination here in 10, 15 years. But what are your um, the other panelists too have said they don't regret coming back and working here. India presents a different set of challenges, but it can be rewarding too. What do you hear among your, for instance, Sushri is, I believe, right now in the United States. She works there, and she was logging in, trying to see what's happening here. What do you hear from your colleagues, given given the experience of those who returned and their trajectory, and given the projections for India in future? What are you hearing from your colleagues still in the West, still in America? What are they more inclined to come? What are they expecting? Is there a red carpet that they're expecting, or
You,
what's a
you
carpet?
should probably hear from me because I am in the climate
All of
change
you.
space. So I guess
Oh,
the answer is very obvious, right? I mean, I'm in the climate change research, so answer is probably very obvious. The first time, I mean, the year I came back, the whole political like landscape change in India, and funding was taken off from funded grants and all. So I was in a much better position, to be honest. So when it comes to climate change, and especially the way we are doing this, I'm going to say our group. I think in that space, people are going to be quite how do I say, like, eager to come and join, because uh, in the West, I think Shaina mentioned much earlier that at certain point, the entire like focus of an academic of a researcher ends up becoming what is my next grant, and then how do I raise the money for it, right? So even though it is very romantic thing, like to become a researcher in a Western country, but the landscape is not that homogeneous. So from my perspective, uh, with all the hope that I can pour in, I think we are. Uh, I mean, I mean, with all the hope that I'm pouring in, I say, we are going the right direction, and like the people that I talk to, they think I made the right decision to come back, and I'm totally enjoying it. So, my opinion.
okay.
Yeah.
Shweta, would you like to go?
Yeah, so I think that there are two parts here. So we've had visits from external funding bodies like EMBO and HFSP, and they've already caught on to the idea that India is going to be a $1 trillion economy soon. And even if the amount of a small part of it goes to research, it's going to be huge. So they've already started preparing for those days when they will come, and they have started coming here to make their presence felt, and then asking us to join them. The so that's kind of a good sign that they are recognizing. There is a subset of people who definitely want to come back no matter what. But then there's a subset of people who are looking at the ease of coming back, and then they want to hear from their colleagues that things are great. I think one of the things that people experience once, after having applied and waited for a response and gotten this job, and then they are ready to start. So as Sandhya was mentioning, she didn't have water in her lab, so it's not maybe as extreme as that, but people do have a time lag setting up a lab here, And I think if we were, as institutions, were to ease that, probably we would see more people coming back. Because so when I came back, I thought that, oh, this is the story, and probably in 6 months I would have an embo paper. So, it took me 4 years and it didn't go to embo anyway. But I learned my lesson the hard way. I think everybody who's coming back is learning, is experiencing the same thing. They want to hit the ground running, but then there's a huge lag, and then they have to start. So that's something that if we take care of, we would see much more ingress.
Would you like to comment, Sandhya?
It's, I would say that yes, there are challenges and there are things to work on. There are also quality of life issues like air quality, which are going to increasingly become an issue. But I would say that we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity now as well as going forward. And I would say we have this opportunity because of two things. One is the West, as very rightly has been pointed out by Shantanu, has become a much more challenging place where, once you get your grant, things will work. But you're always, one of the things you hear, at least with the big grants, is that you need to essentially finish the story and you have to fight for it, fight to and hope to get the grant. But once you get the grant, you're okay for 4 years or 5 years. But then you're already thinking about what is the next grant you're going to get. And I always felt that getting money in India is challenging. I'm not saying it's not. The grants are smaller and the disbursement end is particularly horrendous.
Bad,
But
yeah.
once you get a little bit of money, and have a track record, it's not extremely, you will get something. In either one or the other agency, you will get some money. And so I think that there are different challenges here in than in the West. And I would really say that you can, if you play your cards right, do slightly more adventurous science here. It is possible. The second thing is the climate in, especially in the United States, has become very difficult, where there's a lot of anxiety for young people. So we should, I think personally, if we can capitalize on it and attract the next crop of really good people, it would be very nice. I mean, I think one of the nicest things that happened overall in India, in the Indian scientific ecosystem, was the setting up of the IISers, the expansion of the IITs, and across the country, there were a bunch of people who were hired. But because of these new institutions and new departments, there were a lot more hires. So the scientific ecosystem really grew. And now that there are people looking for opportunities outside the West because they're saying, okay, I'm not sure this is the place I want to build my career, I really feel India has a chance to capitalize on it. I would say, despite challenges, no matter where you are in the world, getting a lab up and running is share some similarities to getting a small startup up and running.
Yeah.
And what those challenges are vary from country to country. There are specific things which we need to make better in India, but there are challenges everywhere. And I think more people should look at India as a place where they can build a career, especially if they want to do something slightly offbeat or unusual. I think this would still be a good place. So
We
I
need
think
to.
very positively about it, despite my challenges.
Okay, thank you. We need to wrap up the discussion, but I thought Venkatesh Raman posted something insightful. We were having a discussion on the culture in India. He's saying something important. In the West, bulk of research happens in universities, which also teach large undergraduate students. So young students are exposed to top class researchers early on. In India, due to the fact that the bulk of undergraduate students are outside premier institutions, we miss out on inculcating scientific rigor in the early stages. While we comment about NRIs visiting the IITs, shouldn't we also have large scale collaborations between premier institutes and colleges, universities? Certainly, I think that's point taken. We need to wrap this discussion now. Thanks for joining in. We heard some very wonderful insights and some surprising positives about research in India, given that there's going to be an action. We're going to see the budget tomorrow. There are big expectations on higher education and research. We don't know. We hope the finance minister comes up with something on that score. We will keep this discussion going. India will always do well, do much better with at least some of the talent coming back and doing research here. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Kalyan. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.